Okay, so I want to talk about deception and deception as contrasted with truth. Um, what's 2 plus 2? It's 4. Is there any other answer? You can get into, okay, we're doing base this number or base that number. I get that. But most of the time, when we're talking about base 10 numbers, there's one answer to 2 plus 2. It's 4. Period. That's authoritative. The only discipline in which you can have absolute proof is mathematics. I'm going to talk about authority from the viewpoint of the Bible. In the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. He's the authority. He creates man, and he gives him a fourfold mandate. He is to rule. He is to be fruitful and multiply. Then God takes Adam and puts him in the garden and says, dress it and keep it. Dress, the Hebrew word is abad, which means to serve. And then shamar, the Hebrew word meaning that's for dress and keep. It's the same word as the watchman on the walls. It is to protect, to guard, to safeguard. Okay? So that's his fourfold mandate. To rule, to be fruitful and multiply. That's not only talking about reproduction, that's talking about flourishing. And whatever he does, it flourishes. Then to serve and protect. Okay? That's man's mandate from God. Okay? God makes the earth, puts man on it, and gives him the keys, the authority. He has authority to rule over all the earth. Okay? But he's also under authority. He cannot lead who cannot follow. He's following God. He's under God's authority, and therefore can lead. Okay? Now, the authority system comes with several aspects. There is, how many opinions matter in the authority system? One. That's the truth. From the authority, from God. Okay. There's always a restriction. Thou shalt not. Okay? The first restriction that was given to Adam, don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's not the tree of knowledge. It's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Big distinction. Okay? Every other tree, go for it. That tree, don't. God creates woman out of man, and God doesn't tell Eve the mandate. Adam does. And Adam doesn't do as good a job as God did. Okay? Now the serpent enters the picture. Now, we know the serpent to be Lucifer or Satan. I will call him the serpent in this story. Okay? He's not going to deceive by coming in as God's enemy. Because they love God, they walk with him, they trust him. So he's not going to come in going, okay? He's not going to get any followers, any believers, or anything. But he wants to do things a little differently. The first thing he has to do is create confusion. So the first thing he says, now different translations put it different ways. Most of them say, did God really say? That's not what the original translation says. The original translation, they don't punctuate because they're not sure if it's a statement or if it's a question. It would be like if you're sitting on a park bench and I come and I stand fairly close to you, but I'm not looking at you. I'm not paying attention to you. And I say, I wonder if this person knows that their fly is open. Now that creates confusion in them. Or is he talking to me? Is he talking to someone else? And what does it make you want to do? Make you want to check your fly. All right? I've just psychomotored you. I've just manipulated you. I created confusion in your mind with a desire to want to check something out. Okay? He creates confusion. He comes in and he's sitting there by Eve and he says, God said you couldn't eat of any tree in the garden? Now, he's not coming in as an enemy. He's coming in like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't understand this. This is confusing. All right. Now Eve jumps in right away. No. God didn't say that. God said we can eat of any tree in the garden, just not the one in the midst of it. And we're not even supposed to touch it or we'll die. Is that what God said? No. What the serpent said is not what God said. God said that you couldn't eat of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. Eve said the tree that's in the midst of the garden, a little sloppy definition, and then we can't even touch it. That sounds like Adam saying, you know what, don't even touch it. Just to be safe, don't even touch it. But that's not what God said. And you can sense the dissatisfaction in Eve. I want to touch it. Why would God make something I'm not allowed to touch? Okay? And this confusion is not created by God, it's created by Adam because he didn't tell exactly what God said. He approximated and he put some little additions in there. Okay? So in doing this, in approaching this the way he did, the serpent is giving the right to question authority. All right? He's making it sound silly and absurd. God made all this food and he's not allowing you to eat any of it? You know, it sounds like a reasonable question, but based on a misunderstanding. So Eve is quick to correct the misunderstanding. You know, when you're in the role of the teacher, that plays to the ego. Okay? Oh, hey, I get to tell this person here. There's two ways to manipulate people. Control their information, control their mental states. Okay? The confusion helps control your mental states. Okay? Now, what is the serpent's response? You're not gonna die. God is a God of love. He doesn't go around smiting people all the time. You're not gonna die. This is what it is. See, God knows about good and evil, and you don't. And he knows that if you eat the fruit of this tree, that you're going to know just like he knows. And he kind of wants to keep you down. You know, he's coming in as a friend, as an ally. He's holding out on you. Okay. And Eve, all right, let me back that up. The serpent then, instead of taking it as authority, there is one opinion here that matters, and that's God said don't do it. He's turning that into now a point of view. And there's another equal point of view that you can come in with your own understanding. Not trusting in God, not believing in God, not resting in God. God made you smart. You should be able to do this for yourself. Okay? You don't need his authority to tell you because you're smart enough to figure this out for yourself. And we can tell this infected Eve because she said, or she didn't say, but it said that when she saw that the fruit was pleasing to the eye, that it was good for food, and that it was useful for obtaining wisdom. Now read that. The lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. 3 types of sin. In other words, she's looking at it from an experiential way, using her senses, a sensual way, not sexual, but sensual, using your senses, rather than trusting in the Word of God. That now became a point of view, and this is her point of view. All right? And she eats it. And then she gives some to her husband, who was there. A lot of guys like to tailor the story as though Eve did this all while Adam was at the store and he comes home and now this big mess has been made. That's not true at all. Adam's sitting by there walking. Now, the second that the serpent said, you're not going to die, he should have said, time out. No, God talked to me specifically. God said don't do it. We should not do it. That's not what he does. He's looking at Eve going, let's see where this takes us. Because if she messes up, I can always blame her because she's the one doing it. So he abdicates. Okay? So it's a point of view. Now, manipulation, deception, that's what I said. That's the origin of it. This has been used to manipulate large groups of people. And it got really organized in the way it was done. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, from the Hegelian dialectic, that guy. He and Nietzsche and Marx, those were the three guys that were studied by the Frankfurt School, by Georg Lukács, Theodor Adorno, Kurt Lewin, all these guys, Walter Benjamin, yeah. And what they did was they analyzed sentence structures that the serpent used to deceive Eve. And based on that, they made a system of thought. And they called it the dialectic. Okay? They realized that you cannot directly attack beliefs without repercussions. But that we can't think unless we're thinking in language. And we can alter language. Language can be ambiguous. It can be blurry. It can be unclear. And if I can make alternate definitions, I can change how a language works. And if I can do that, I can control indirectly how you think. And if I can control how you think, I can control what you do. Marx fleshed this out, that the secret of this was in the role of the father. Now, let's go back to the Bible and let's look at this a little bit. In the Bible, the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet is an aleph. The original pictograph is an ox's head, and it meant first because it was the first letter in the alphabet, or it meant strong, or it meant leader. The second letter in the Hebrew alphabet is a bet or a beth. And the original pictograph is like a teepee or a tent, a home, or what's in the house or home, a family. Okay. Now let's put the aleph and the bet together, and you get the first in the house, the leader of the home, the strong in the family. We know it by its familiar term, Abba. It means father. Okay. The father is the role of God, has the authority of God, but only under that authority. In other words, he's speaking. Remember, I told you the mandate of man was to rule, to be fruitful and multiply, to serve and to protect. Serve and protect, that's like a cop. Okay? A cop is not the law. A cop is a servant under the law. He doesn't speak with his own authority. He speaks with the authority of law, but only as far as he's under it and he's serving it. Okay? When he arrests you, he doesn't say, I'm arresting you. He says, under the code, and he'll read the law and the statute and all that kind of stuff. He's saying he's under the authority of the law. Now, what do you call a cop that uses his authority for selfish gain or for something that's outside of the law? You call that a corrupt cop. That doesn't make the law corrupt. That makes the cop corrupt. Fathers do the same thing. The patriarchal system has been shifted to mean like an Archie Bunker type, women are second-class citizens. I'm going to rule. I'm going to do whatever I can. And everybody in the family has to serve the king of the house, which is me. Now, serve and protect. All right? He's the one serving. He's the one laying down his life for the family. In fact, let's go a step further with the Hebrew language. The letter He, the original pictograph is outstretched arms. It meant behold or revealed. You take a He and you put it in the middle of a word, it's that word revealed or the essence of that word. Now let's take our Abba, the aleph and the bet together, and let's put a He in the middle of it. Okay? Ahob is the Hebrew word for love. Love is the essence of the Father. What the Father does is motivated not by lording it over, not by greed, not by any of that stuff, not by pride. It's motivated by love. It's supposed to. All right? So they realized this Frankfurt School, Georg Lukács and company, that the strength of this system was in the Father. So they had to get rid of the Father. All right. Now, in communism, you have a person here, and you say, "Hey, here's a list of what communism is," and they put a gun to his head, and they say, "You agree with this list?" And they go, "No." Bam. Next person comes up. Right.
here's a list of what communism is. Do you agree with what communism is? And they took a look at the dead guy on the ground, and they look at you, and they go, yeah, I agree with that. So that's it's taken over by force, okay? Then they infiltrate the social institutions, all the schools, all the churches, all the centers of intellect, and they start brainwashing and taking over and redefining things and all that kind of stuff. Now, this group of transformational communists said you get the cart before the horse. Infiltrate the social institutions first, and then when you go for the seat of power, it's bloodless because you've already brainwashed them. And they got kicked out of the Communist Party. They said you can't have a revolution without bullets. So these guys all went to Germany, and they formed this Institute for Marxist Research, later called the Institute for Social Research, but commonly known as the Frankfurt School because most of it was done in Frankfurt. So one of the guys that they drew from was Karl Marx, who his thesis on Feuerbach, number 11, talks about the father, realizing that the family is the secret to the Holy Family. By that, he means our Heavenly Father is the authority, but he's out there. And if we can do something about the father figure in the family, then the voice of the authority is gone, and we can do what we want, because that's the thing that's holding us back. But conscience is the voice of the father in your head. Conscience doesn't kick in when you're doing something right. It kicks in when you're doing something wrong. So it says no. Or dad wouldn't want me to do that. All right? Which means if you kill the father, you still have the father's voice in you. So you have to do something about that voice. So you do exactly what serpent did. You make it a point of view, specifically one that's irrelevant. And you justify your position. And if you can do that, you don't need to kill father because now dad's irrelevant. Okay? He doesn't matter anymore. And now I can transition my family and I can go in a whole different direction. I don't have the benefits of authority. I don't have the benefits of truth. Okay? Now, it's a funny thing about truth. Truth isn't dependent on whether or not you believe in it. Truth doesn't care what you believe. Truth doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care if you don't like the idea that 2 + 2 = 4. I want it to be 5. Well, we don't care because the truth is 2 + 2 does equal 4. All right. When you hold contradictory concepts in your mind, when you do this by creating two authorities, dialogue, which is what the serpent introduced, dia, across, logos, to speak across instead of speaking under authority. Now we're speaking across. There's more than one authority here going on. And once I do that, now I got two authorities. I've got cognitive dissonance. I've got two things that are saying different things, and I somehow have to reconcile them, which means that affects my ability for conscience to work. And now I can manipulate it. There is no brainwashing without cognitive dissonance, without those contradictory things in my mind doing something. So truth matters. Truth is important. There are no relativists. All right? Now, a lot of you might be out there saying, I'm a relativist. I find that offensive. I say, all right, let me suggest to you that you're a relativist in areas of your life that it's convenient for you to do. But if I find something that you care about and I try and apply relativism in that, you're not going to be too happy with me. I use an example that J.P. Moreland uses. He went to a store and was talking with the owner, and it comes out that he says he was a moral relativist. And he also got the impression that he was an environmentalist, had all kinds of stuff around his shop and stuff. So he said, I want to tell you something that my friends and I do. I don't know what you're going to think about it, but every year we put $200 in the kitty from each of us. We go buy a big 55-gallon drum of sulfuric acid, and we take it down to the lake, and then we dump it in the lake. And we've all taken bets on how many fish it's going to kill. And the one that comes to the closest number of fish that's killed, they get the rest of the kitty less the cost of the sulfuric acid. Now, he said that, by this time the veins were kind of popping out on his face. And he says, I'm not an expert in body language, but I'm getting the impression that you think that what me and my friends do is wrong. and not wrong because it's wrong for me to do it. It's wrong because it's just wrong. And I might suggest to you that in that aspect, you are not a relativist. You are an absolutist. You think that's wrong for anybody to do. Now, he had let the guy off the hook and said, my friends and I don't actually do this. I just wanted to prove a point. So, but that's the thing about truth. It doesn't care what you believe. It's truth. All right. You can discuss how you can arrive at it, how to define it, all that kind of stuff. But that's my take on deception, on authority versus dialogue. Dialogue, when you're doing it in a diplomacy thing, I don't have the authority over this country. That country doesn't have authority over me. That's perfectly acceptable to approach from a dialogue basis and to try and work out something. But truth is not a dialogue basis, because 2 + 2 does equal 4.